Anderson, if this were a 100-mile-an-hour storm, sure, you'd lose some mobile homes, you'd lose some sheds, you'd have localized flooding, probably not a whole lot more. But when you start talking about 130 to 160 miles an hour roughly, which is what we're talking about with these categories, look at the model. It's so different then. Now you're talking about winds that are strong enough to rip the roofs off of houses, to knock big trees down, to do a tremendous amount of damage out there. And when that happens, there's really nothing to do except try to get to a safe space if you possibly can, because that damage is so devastating out there. And that's not counting the storm surge. When you start talking about a storm surge of 13 to 18 feet maybe, that's going to have a big impact, especially in this area. And let me explain why. Much of this part of the eastern seaboard is not really very high at all. If you look at this, if you had a storm surge of just 9 to 10 feet, everything in red here is going to be submerged. And that is an awful lot of people, Anderson.
There's a lot of talk about this hurricane possibly stalling on the coast, just sitting there instead of moving on inland. I was just talking to our last guest about that. Can you explain the difficulties that's going to bring?
Yeah, essentially you have a pincer effect. This is what Jennifer was talking about a little while ago. You have the water that's pushing in from the ocean, and it's piling up on shore, and at the same time, the inland rain is pushing water this way, and then you wind up with an indeterminate amount of water in some communities. And that storm surge really is where the damage comes. Look at the record. If you go back to Hurricane Ike in 2008, storm surge 15 to 20 feet, deaths 103, $30 billion in damage. Of course, we all know about Katrina. You know it best, Anderson. Storm surge 20 to 28 feet, more than 1,800 deaths, $128 billion worth of damage. And you made mention a little while ago about Hurricane Hugo, also on the East Coast. That was back in the late 80s. 20 feet storm surge, deaths $59 billion in damage, and as we have noted, that's back when a whole lot fewer people were living in the bullseye.